2, 11, 12, bar! What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Lie in the morning. Hooray, up he rises, hooray, up he rises, hooray, up he rises, early in the morning. Put him in the brig and dilly sauber, put him in the brig and dilly sauber, put him in the brig and dilly sauber, early in the morning. Hooray, up he rises, hooray, up he rises, hooray, up he rises, early in the morning.
Hello everyone and welcome to Drunken Sailors Brew and Barbecue, where today it is Brew Day. Finally. Mother Nature has not been kind of late, so it's been delayed for about a week or so, but I've got some hungry yeast that need to eat. And so today we are brewing. And we're a little cramped in the garage, so I've made a few modifications to the process, but nothing that will affect the final product. Today it's going to be a RyePA or a Rye IPA. The rye, not to be confused with, say, the taste of rye bread, which really comes from caraway seeds, but rye beer comes off with a slightly silky, sometimes maybe an oily texture to it, a little bit of a spice. And in this case, I'm going to be hopping it with some American hops. We've got over here Mount Hood, Columbus, and some homegrown Cascades, homegrown right in the backyard. And before we begin, as is tradition with Drunken Sailor, we will start the brew session off with a beer from last session. In this case, that was a Kolsch, a light and spritzy summer type of beer, which is pretty fitting given the end of summer. And now we'll be moving on to some stronger IPAs, Scotch ales, barley wines, stouts, and the like. We'll be right back. Okay. We've got a few more minutes before that mash tun, the strike temperature gets to where we want it. We're going to want that strike temperature at about 165 degrees. That way, when we add our grain to the mash, we'll get right around that 149, 150 degree mark, which is what we're going to be mashing at today. Will be no step mashes. We're just going to do a strict straight up infusion mash. It's going to last about an hour, at which case we're going to do, because I am in the garage and kind of cramped, we're going to do a batch sparge today as opposed to a fly sparge, which is why you don't see my hot liquor tank here. While we're at it, let's take a look inside the mash tun. Okay, there's my sparge manifold. Now, normally, here it comes out right here, the hot liquor tank or hot water tank would be hooked up to this right here, and it would sprinkle out of that into the mash when it comes time to sparge. What we've got here is it's a standard cooler. I don't want to fog up the camera here, but there's my manifold is a stainless steel mesh hose. It actually works out pretty well. I put in a bulkhead there for the thermometer, and on the back side, there we go, there's our drain, which will go into the boil kettle, which is, now that's my old kettle, that's the 8-gallon kettle. Here's the newer kettle, well, newer, it's several years old, but it's a 15-gallon stainless steel kettle, and inside there's what we call a bazooka screen. That is to strain out any of the trube and stuff after the boil. Got a little thermometer. I can also put a plug in there. Actually, I need a new thermometer. That one's out of Cal. And also we got some high temp tubing, a copper counterflow chiller, which works excellent. That can bring boiling wort from, well, boiling to room temperature from one end to the other. It's great. And of course we have a standard 6-gallon glass carboy, which is full of cleaning solution right now. We'll have plenty of time to get that ready by the time the boil's done. So, okay, our strike temperature is right where we want it to be at that 165 mark. We're going to go ahead and add our grain to the water. You never want to add water to the grain. Always grain to the water. That way you don't get lumps. So here we go. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, we're in there. Okay. All right, we're going to give this a little stirring, and I'll give you a look. Let me get this all in here first. Come on now. What we've got is basically the consistency of oatmeal. And what's going to happen is, at this temperature, the starches in the grains, over time, will turn and convert into sugar. Those sugars will be eaten by the yeast later on, which will create some nice flavors and alcohol. All right, let's take a look. And yeah, oh, it smells really good. Oh, we're fogging up. Back off a little bit. And let's see what we've got for a temperature. Oh, look at that, 149. I don't know if you can see that or not. That is perfect. So let me get resituated. There it is, the mash. Drunken Sailor's Longboat Rye IPA. Okay, we're back. Now, the mash is sitting at a comfortable 150 degrees, right where we want it. Once again, we're going to have that sit for an hour. And so during that time, I'm going to take the opportunity now just to give a brief tour of the brewery, at least of what I'm using today. I wanted to get a full tour of the brewery earlier, or actually before this video, before the brew session. However, once again, you know, Mother Nature wasn't exactly cooperative, so I'm just going to give a brief tour of what I'm using today, which isn't everything, but I'll go over a few items and show you what they do. But before I begin, I would like to say that for anyone who's interested in brewing their own beer, don't be intimidated by the copper piping and the big pots and all this stuff. I mean, I do have a few dollars invested, but brewing, like many hobbies, is as easy or as complicated as you want to make it. You can do for less than, say, $100 investment, you can brew a batch of beer right in the kitchen on the stovetop. You don't need any of this stuff that I've got here right now, and you can still be quite successful and make some really good homebrewed beer. And so that's always something to strive for, is good quality beer. So without further ado, I'll go over a couple of the items. 6-gallon glass carboy, once again still getting cleaned. And we've got a 15-gallon stainless steel pot. I am currently set up to brew 10-gallon batches. This will be a 5-gallon batch though. This counterflow chiller is one of the best investments I've made. What it is, it's a copper tube within a tube. And as you can see here, what's going to happen is that hot wort, or pre-fermented beer, comes out of the boiling kettle, will go in there, around the inside tube, and out into the fermenter. The outer tube is hooked up to the garden hose. Kind of see how that works there. The inner tube is also twisted to maximize efficiency. So basically what happens is it goes in at boiling temperature, and once it makes its way through, it comes out at room temperature. And that is really effective. You want to get that beer or wort down to pitching temperature, as we call it, as soon as possible, because all those sugars that the yeast are going to eat also want to be eaten by bacteria. So you want to get the yeast a head start on all that bacteria that's just floating around in the air, so that you have a better, cleaner, tastier product. So, once again, we're going to let that sit for a little while, and we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, now we are ready to sparge. And by sparging, I am referring to the process of rinsing the sugars off of the grain and then putting them over into the boil kettle. So what we've got is some really hot water here. We've got our mash. Been sitting at about 150 for about 75 minutes now or so. And what we're going to do is, and this is where the whole idea of being in the garage kind of compresses things a little bit, at least for me. And this is what I mean by batch sparge. Batch sparge is, I'm going to take some of this super hot water and I'm going to start with 2 gallons, thereabouts. Okay. Bring this mash temperature to about 170 to 180 degrees. What that is going to do, it's going to stop the process of converting the starches into sugars. Oops, steaming up. And yep, it's climbing. Temperature is climbing. And it's going to start rinsing those sugars off of the grain, which will come out of this valve and into the boil kettle. So we're going to give that a few minutes. We're actually going to let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes at about 170 degrees once again. And then we will start transferring the wort into the boil kettle. Okay, we've been sitting at our mash out temperature of 170 degrees for about 10 or 15 minutes. And now it is time to mash out, which is basically get it out of there and put it into there. Now as the sugars are getting rinsed off of the grain with that higher temperature, they're going through the mash tun, through that manifold at the bottom of the mash tun, which is straining out just the wort, leaving all the grains behind. And it is emptying into our boil kettle, which in about another minute or so, we're going to fire it up with our 60,000 BTU burner. And we're going to do about a 60 to 70 minute boil. At various stages, we'll be adding hops to the boil, and I'll go over that in just a minute. But for now, we'll let this go. And I'll be back in a few minutes for the boil. See you then.